Hello, everybody. Welcome to another one of these live stream sessions with myself, Sam Gregory, and I'm joined today by Charlotte Bellamy. Charlotte, how are you doing?
Hi, I'm good, thank you. Yourself, Sam?
I'm all right. I'm all right. We've just been discussing relative coldnesses and weather patterns over the two countries that we're in because I'm in Dorset, as everybody knows who watches these, but you are not. Whereabouts are you exactly, Charlotte?
I'm in the Netherlands or Holland. Holland is like the west side of the Netherlands, and the rest of it is the Netherlands. So, not to be confused.
No, well, I'm glad. Actually, I'm glad you got into that early because that was on my list of things because it does get confused, doesn't it? And we're going to tidy that up as you just did there. But yes, Holland is a part of the Netherlands, so to speak, isn't it? And you've been out there a while, but we're going to come to that in just a second. And I'm very excited to have Charlotte with us. Anyone who's been a Light and Land live stream watcher for since we started doing these in COVID. Remember that one? Since we started doing them in COVID times, you might remember Charlotte's been on with me before. We've talked about Holland and the Netherlands generally, but we've got a specific theme tonight, which we're going to get into, and we'll get into more of that. Charlotte's work over there, the fact she's been living there a good amount of time, we're going to talk about too. And we've got a nice array of images which are representative of the area and some of Charlotte's approaches to photography as well. But we are at the beginning of the show, and like ever, we like to talk about where we all are, where you all are, and if you are watching from somewhere, do let us know in the comments. I can see a good number of you coming on the stream already. If you're watching on YouTube, you can just pop that in the comments box there, and or on Facebook. We're live streaming on both tonight. Marilyn's with us in Canada. Canada, wow. We thought it was cold in Dorset with -1 degrees. I think we've just been trumped there. There we go. Whereabouts, Marilyn? Let me know. Hazel is in Lincoln, as ever. Good. Hello, Hazel. Ken is on the Isle of Sheppey. Good man. And Colin. Hello, Charlie.
Yeah,
Nice to see you. So there's someone who knows you there, Charlotte.
Yeah, right. And Charlie, that gets confusing. I don't call myself Charlie in here because I can't compete with Charlie.
Yeah, there's only one Charlie.
There's only one Charlie.
But he's not here. You are, so you're
Yeah.
you're the Charlie tonight. Brenda's in High Wycombe. Oh, look, they're all coming on now. June is in Aberdeen. Joachim in Brussels as ever.
Yeah.
Oh, and Gina's up in Chile University of Hull. Yes, I would imagine that is Chile. You know what? It's been very attractive for landscape photographers in the last couple of days in the UK because of the weather. And there's something, isn't there, about the autumn winter period that kind of drags people out. Do you find that you're super productive in those? I know there's a reason why we're going to talk about spring in a moment, but you personally, do you get out much in that time of year?
Autumn for me is I do this year. It's been really quite awful, the weather here, to be honest, and we probably had autumn for about 2 weeks, and honestly the colour here was not great at all this year. Previous years, those that joined me here with Light and Land will know I even got told by some people that it was as good as Maine or Canada when they came out here. I was like absolutely amazed. This year, yeah, and last few days I've just kind of hibernated when it got cold. I didn't even go out and see the snow yesterday.
Oh, but I know you've been very busy with lots of other things, so that I'm going to let you off, Charlotte. Don't worry about that. Barbara's with us as well. Thank you. Lots of regular names, and Dave there in wet, flooded. Oh, I hope you're not flooded, Dave. All the best if you are. Go upstairs. That's my only tip. Not very helpful, is it? But I hope you're all right over there in Reading. And Marilyn, and then we're going to jump into the images in just a second, is in Ontario, small city of Owen Sound. Well, there we go. Fantastic. Well, I'm very happy to have you all with us. We really appreciate it. Charlotte, before we jump straight into the images, because we are concentrating on Holland, but specifically because you run a tour there for Light and Land, which is coming up. We're going to talk more about that, obviously, over the course of the evening. But just before we go into that in a bit more detail, I've alluded to the fact you've been living there a little while, and anyone who knows you from the stream or from workshops previously will know that as well. But can you just outline how long you've been out there and the fact you're full time there now, aren't you, as a photographer living in that part of the world?
Yeah, so we came here, it's going to be 12 years next year, in May. Came for my husband's job, on the promise of a pony on my behalf. I got the pony, my husband did his job. And I started as a full-time photographer. No, I was a full-time photographer before. But I changed from portrait and wedding photography, which is what I was doing in the UK, to landscape photography, because I couldn't speak the language. So that's when I started my landscape photography 12 years ago. And then I got into my ICM photography about 6-7 years ago. For anybody that knows the Netherlands, I'm actually over almost on the German border, near the town city of Arnhem, famous for the history side of things. Yeah, and it's not officially Holland, but where I do the tours is Holland. So
yeah. Well, I think the reason I kind of just wanted to touch on that is because I think there's really something to having a local, on the scene. And I know you don't live exactly in that area, but I know you've spent a lot of weeks, months probably in there in the last 12 years. It's because it really makes a big difference. And it's something I think we always try to make sure that if we're taking you somewhere, this is a global light and land point, that, okay, we can't all be locals wherever we're taking you specifically, but we will have been there, we will be very experienced there. And if it's somewhere far flung, we may have an agent on the ground who is a local, etc., because you just need to know how stuff works, right? It's like with a group shot. You just need to know how you get from A to B, what the challenges are going to be logistically, locally, how you're going to eat, all that kind of stuff makes a big difference, right?
Yeah, absolutely. We were just saying, one of my great beliefs is I only run tours if I'm 100% confident that I can offer the best opportunities and the best experience. And my Dutch is not actually bad now, so I can get away with asking people nicely to go into tulip fields and speaking to farmers. And we've been given all kinds of opportunities when we've been out in the tulip fields. Also, I know what I can, regale the full menu from Dutch into English for everybody, because interestingly, some places are great for tourists and other places really aren't. And because I tend to go a bit off the beaten track, we end up in little villages that really are not tourist spots. They're not aimed at tourists, and that's what's lovely. It can give the real sort of in getting under the skin of the Netherlands, not in Holland, not just going all the places that tourists want to tick off. And I think that's what's special about what I do here in the Netherlands here, and when I run the autumn tours over where I live. I've been doing them for 10 years now, and pretty much the same places every time, because they're fail safe, because I know them and nobody else does. So it's why sort of mess up something that's working really well.
Yeah, no, definitely. And we're gonna get into that a bit, because there are a number of kind of places on this trip, and that allows us a great range of things to talk about tonight in terms of shooting in cities, in villages, and of course famously in and around the tulips. So we're going to talk about all of that tonight. So let's jump in to the images. And if anyone out there is watching who has a question, do let us know in the comments. Charlotte is very happy to answer them. Sam's guessing here. No, I'm sure she is. Of course we are. And if it's a technical thing, if it's a thing about the locale, if it's whatever it is, do let us know. But I've mentioned there at the top that this tour has a variety of shooting opportunities in terms of the location types. So just could you outline a little bit of that for us, Charlotte, and then we'll dig into some of these city-based images, and then we'll go on to the flowers and whatnot.
Yeah, I mean, although I do a lot of creative photography, it's amazing what we managed to pack into this tour. We do everything from Amsterdam city through to tiny little villages. Amsterdam, out in the tulip fields, which is like completely rural, right in the northwest of Holland. And then we also put in Kokenhof as well, and we fit in the windmills as well, which are actually, give or take, depends what the year's like. Sometimes they are amongst the tulip fields, other years they're not, just because of what happens out in the fields each year. So yeah, everything from landscape to street photography to sort of urban landscape, reflections, creative photography, flower photography, macro photography. Even if people are willing to, and the weather's okay, I am willing to get up at 4:30 in the morning, and we go and do a sunrise tour, get back for breakfast, and then take it easy the rest of the day. Well, not take it easy, we go out photographing, but we go back for breakfast after we've done the sunrise to recover. And then again, sunsets, if they're available. We have an evening part in Amsterdam to go out and do the evening photography. which, depending on what the weather offers, again, runs from everything from the day through to blue hour, through to sunset, through to night photography, long exposures, light trails, ICM, you name it. I can do anything. So I'm happy to try and help everybody with anything as well.
Yeah, and I think that's really important because, the goal always is to find what the people with you are wanting to do themselves and how they see things. And I think that flexibility, that variety that you can offer and that we all try to offer is really important, isn't it? Because it's not just a case of, look, you're all coming to do what I do. It's you're all coming and I want to help you get better at what you do and how you see and what you want to see. And I think this array of scenarios, as you've outlined there, I suppose that's possible because of the geography, isn't it? That in such a short period, actually, you can see such a broad variety of things.
Yeah, I mean, my husband jokes, and I joke because you say I don't live that close to the tulip fields. It's only an hour and a half. Now, when I lived in Gloucestershire, the idea of having to drive all the way to London, which was only an hour and a half, was like completely not on my radar. Now, I will quite happily go over to the tulip fields, just up to Amsterdam for half a day, and it's an hour and a half. Everywhere's an hour and a half from where I live in Holland. And so on this, although we cover quite, a large space of Holland, it's so easily accessible here. The road network's brilliant. And it's we can get around very easily to cover different areas. And also, I've figured out the best way to work to these areas to do them as most efficiently as possible, so that we get to the right places at the right times, that kind of thing.
Cool. Well, let's get into 2 or 3 of the images we're in Amsterdam here, aren't we?
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, I'm going to say something which may shock you to your boots, and I think you guess where I'm going with this. I have never been to Amsterdam.
No.
Yep. Not even as a teenage boy or young 20-something-year-old boy.
I missed out on that opportunity now.
I know.
I'm visiting now, so
let's not get dragged into that. So tell me about Amsterdam and what you kind of seek to do with people and show people while you're there, and where we are on this particular image as well.
Yeah, so Amsterdam, interestingly, we're actually not that far up from what is the red light district in Amsterdam. Bizarrely, because it's so open, it's not that big a deal. And this canal is actually really, really beautiful once you move up away from the busy area. Amsterdam, I find, has so many different opportunities, from architecture through to street photography, through to the reflections in the water, the boats, people, shooting in black and white, colour, everything is offered. And this is taken at the sort of time that we go. And the trees are always, unless we've had a really, really late winter, the trees are just coming out of bud as well. So you get these lovely green trees, which just add an extra sort of colour dimension within the city. It's actually concentric rings of canals. And so I think what we've got this year is we've actually got 2 bites of the cherry. We've got, a chance to go out in the evening and a chance the following day, which we don't normally do. We just do 1 shot at Amsterdam normally, and I try to get around as much as possible. Whereas this tour, we've broken it up a little bit. So you get a whole morning and an evening separate, so you can enjoy the different experiences. The canals are completely different at night time. We walk around the city. I have a place where I normally want to get to for lunch or for dinner, and that's the only point at which we have to make by a certain time. And I know where it is. So basically, it's just encouraging people to see things that maybe they might not have thought might be interesting to photograph, like this. Lots of straight lines, and then you've got this wonky lamppost. You've got the very traditional bike, and you've got another photo later on. I love capturing bikes because it's so Dutch. And all the windows, the architecture in Amsterdam is not straight. It's all wonky. And it's kind of embracing these differences and these interesting things that I see that are just very Amsterdam.
Yeah, well, I was going to ask about the architectural side of things, shall we say, because we're going to show a couple of bits from the villages later on in our chat this evening. But it's a bit of a mix, is it, architecturally, Amsterdam? I mean, I suppose because of the nature, there's probably not a huge amount of modern building, is there, within the central area?
Not in the central area.
No.
It's very much old. Lots of shutters, lots of small windows, lots of little doors, lots of steps. And there's a fantastic life out on the streets as well. When you go at the right time, if the weather's nice, there's so many people sat out on the top of their steps, chatting to each other with a cup of coffee, sort of sat on the edge of the canals, legs dangling over, couples kissing, people eating chips, like if you're a street photographer, it's an absolute dream. And I'm not even a street photographer, and I just love capturing things that I spot out and about. And generally people are pretty good as well. It's if they don't want their photo taken, they tend to stick their hand in front of their face. And then and otherwise most people are just very chilled about it, so you can get some really good images, especially with long lenses and things across the water. You can really pick up on the feel as well.
Yeah. I love this one though, Charlotte. I love it for all sorts of reasons, many of which you've alluded to in terms of the straight lines and obviously how wonky, but the bike as well. And it's sort of the sort of plants, flowers at the bottom of those steps. It looks like the bike hasn't moved for ages, but it probably has. But black and white colour. I know I see more of your work in colour, especially obviously with the ICM and some of the extended technique stuff as well. But do you like working in black and white as well, or is it?
I do.
Are you a colour girl, really?
No, well, I wouldn't say. I think I am a colour girl, but I actually really love working in black and white because sometimes it's quite different for me. I think sometimes places lend themselves. Tulip fields, not so much, but you will see a picture that's alternative later. I find it depends on the image that I'm trying to create, and if the image is all about lines, shapes, shadows, light. Then I find that black and white can lend itself beautifully without the distraction of like if that bike had been red or the trees are green or that one door was pink and the other one was blue, or that can add to a lot of complicated. Whereas this one, you notice the blocks of black and you notice the white, you notice the lines and the difference and the contrast. So for that I do a bit, not method, but yeah.
You enjoy the colour, and there are times I set you right up for that, didn't I? There are times where colour is exactly what you need, and this is great. This guy looks fab on his pink bike. So tell us what's going on, Charlotte. Is this just a random right in front of you quick snap?
It was.
Yeah,
okay. It was actually, and sometimes horror being horror. I have a Nikon Z6, which we spoke about like many years ago when we first met. And I'm not scared to use it on its auto mode if I need to grab that shot, to be honest. And I saw this guy coming across the bridge just in front of me, and I was like, oh my God, do I dare take this? Because this is just like a gift shot. What you have to do is, sometimes he wasn't bothered. He was not remotely bothered by me. Stood almost in front of him taking the picture. I just thought it was an opportunity too good to miss, because bikes in Amsterdam are just, and characters. It's a very multicultural, very vibrant, very alive community. And I think this just sums up Amsterdam for me, to be honest.
Well, it's fab, isn't it? Because even his shoes are pink. I mean, look at it. He's gone the full hog. And if he had a baguette or something, not that he would in Amsterdam, but you know what I mean, in his basket, that wouldn't work, would it? The fact it's got flowers in it is just... And yet he's got a fag in his mouth and he looks pretty like he's had a hard few years, doesn't he? But
maybe it's not his bike at all. Who knows?
Yeah. He's cycling pretty relaxed for someone if it wasn't his bike. But no, I suppose that's a good example. But you mentioned earlier that the kind of breadth of techniques and types of things you like to employ, and we've got a couple of examples of that as we go through the evening. But I'm guessing this is around some reflections in the water, and so that can be quite a cool thing to play with, especially maybe if it's overcast or whatever. You've always got stuff with water, haven't you, to play with in Amsterdam?
Yeah, there's a couple of not all of the canals, because some of them are very busy with canal boats, tour boats, and those don't lend themselves because it's such a moving water. But some of the ones that are a little bit further out, I just love spending hours, just wandering around, just photographing in the canals. And, it's a bit like the tulips. If you've been to somewhere so many times, you're always looking for something slightly different and a slightly different angle on how to photograph the canals. And in fact, I did a French TV documentary a couple of years ago, and they actually picked me because of this. It was a different way I saw Amsterdam to any other photographer they could find. And literally, it was just all my reflections in the canals of Amsterdam. And some of them are just like, people say, what are you taking that photo of? It's a Portaloo on the other side. I say, oh no, but look at the reflection in there. Or the cars lend themselves brilliantly to really interesting colours and things. And then I like to capture it. Sometimes I like to capture it when it's still, but actually the best time is when there's just a slight movement in it, and it just kind of creates that slight wobble of the picture. And that's when I love to capture it. So
Well, Colin loves that. He loves the image. Looks like the white reflections
They
are
are. They are.
letters.
Yeah,
Yes, yeah.
absolutely right. If you can figure out what it says, it looks
Oh,
like Greek or something, doesn't it, from that angle?
it's sort of like the daubings of a psychopath or
Yeah.
something. I mean, not you, Charlotte, obviously, but I tell you, it's the colours as well. That white against the blue and the black. Well, it's kind of like a turquoise, isn't it, in a way? It screams painting. Those combinations you see a lot in modern art paintings, and very interpretive things, should we say? But I really love that, and actually, it probably makes for a really nice change of gear if people have been looking at different things. You've been in the flowers, you've been in more urban things, whatever it is. So it's always nice to see. You mentioned there will be a bit of time of a sort of evening. Is that correct, Charlotte? Yeah. Okay. So you'll get some of this blue hour
Yep.
where obviously the lights come on. That's very attractive as well, isn't it?
Yeah. No, there's a special place where actually this is one of the less photographed bits when everybody stood on the bridges behind me. Quite a lot of people get so engrossed in it they don't even turn around and see this behind them, to be honest. And I'm like, go and have a look over there, go and have a look over there. It's just this is quite early on in the evening. But it's great. These all the little bridges light up, and then there's two bridges that sort of butt onto each other, and the boats go in between the two. And there's some really good vantage points, loads of room for tripods, as long as you don't go too close to the edge with the tripod, which we have had a few go over once or twice. Luckily, no cameras, only tripods. But yeah, it's a really, and it's a really fun thing to do. If you've never done night photography, I'm there to walk you through, talk you through, guide you through the whole, 2-3 hours that we stood there. And then over the years, I've learnt we then generally get a taxi from that point back to the hotel rather than walking 2 kilometres back to the
Everyone's done it. Yeah, they've had enough by then.
By that point, I've learned that. So yeah.
But it sounds like actually the city itself, obviously it's reasonable size, because of where it is, but it is very walkable in that central area, isn't it? You're going to be on foot, so that's nice, because stuff can happen, as we've seen with the chap on his bike, and all sorts of things can come and go in front of you. Well, let's change gear out of the city, and we're gonna touch on some of the flower photography and different areas, and then we're going to get into some of the villages. And just to remind everyone, we're talking about this Impressions of Holland tour workshop, which Charlotte runs out over there in April and May. Now, just let me ask the really obvious question here, Charlotte. I presume that timing is to do with the tulips. Am I correct? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Basically, people, the number of people that contact me and say, I'm coming in the beginning of April. Can I come out with you? And I'm like, please don't pay me to take you to where there are no tulips. Kokenhof is open from the end of March. And this is Kokenhof. This isn't out in the tulip fields. But actually out in the tulip fields, you won't see anything blooming until the middle of April. And then you're looking at probably the end of the first week of May. So what we've done this week, I've actually changed the route very slightly. So we head almost straight out into the tulip fields, whereas normally we sort of hit them a little bit later in the tour. So it's, what the tulips, well, we can talk about the tulips when we get to the tulip tour pictures, but Kokenhof is for anybody that doesn't know, it's a park, it's a garden that they plant up with, it must be millions of bulbs. If you've ever tried to make bulbs look good in your own garden, you can imagine how many they plant. And it's a feast for the senses, honestly. It's actually an overdose of colour, and it's not just tulips, it's everything. And it's beautifully laid out, and we deliberately stay the night before at a hotel really close by, and we get in there. It's like the second early morning that we have to do, and we get in there by 8 o'clock in the morning so that we are in there as the doors open. And so then you get the dewdrops on the petals, and you get a lot less people. So for the first hour, you can get these photos without Photoshop. It's not a problem. After that, the groups start coming in, and by about 10 o'clock in the morning, we revert. And I did this with Sue when we went together. We revert then to more tripod photography, macro photography, small point photography rather than vistas. So you can get both, but knowing how it works, I can guide you to make sure we get to the best places before the people have arrived. So
there's such a crispness of light there, isn't there? I mean, I know I suppose that time of year, late spring, isn't it? Really, you get that kind of clean. I know it can depend on the day, don't get me wrong, but those greens as well, they're fresh, aren't they? You know what I'm saying? It's I like those greens. A lot of photographers actually don't necessarily enjoy working in those, but I quite do. I do, sorry. You do
Yeah.
as well, seemingly.
Yeah, I mean that's barely been touched with Photoshop, I don't think. I think
Mm.
maybe I've just toned down maybe some of the highlights, but other than that, it just screams spring to me, and I think you can't dumb down greens in spring when you come through a long winter.
Yeah, we're screaming for them. So how big is the park? I don't need an exact size, but you know what I mean. Is it of a few kilometers, kind of, is it fair sized, or is
Yeah, I guess I mean, it depends on how quickly you move through, and as well as I do, herding groups of photographers is like trying
cats?
to encourage a group to not, everybody will want to photograph the different things.
Yeah.
So what we do is we arm everybody with maps as soon as we get in, and we book a couple of meeting places. So if people don't want to stay with the group and they really want to do their own thing, they can. You can get through it, or we aim actually only to stay there for the morning, to be honest, because by lunchtime it is so busy with people, it's not that much fun at all. And I've never taken a group away from it before they're ready. If they want to stay, we'll stay a bit longer. And especially this year, we go from Kokenhof back to Amsterdam, whereas normally we're off to catch flights. So it's very easy to walk around. It's very flat. There's different varying undulations of sort of land, but most of it's pretty flat. It's all on hard paths. There's plenty of coffee shops, toilets, that kind of thing. So it's very, very organised.
Practical. You mentioned obviously that, and we're going to talk about some of the tulip fields later. And I know Charlotte's got some hidden spots because of her local knowledge. Obviously, in this area, though, in the park, there's going to be more people around. But you mentioned that when that gets a little bit busier, that's maybe the time to work on the macro, on the smaller scale things. Obviously, you can work without the distractions of things behind you. Yeah. So, I mean, there is a lot of technical things, and I don't want to dive too heavily into that now because that's the kind of thing you're going to do with people when they're in the field. But are there any common things you see that people need the most help with when working on this smaller scale? So whether that's selecting the right lens, whether that's framing properly, whether that's focusing, that's the big one that gets talked about, isn't it? Where do we focus, depth of field, all the rest of it. So can you give us just a taste of some of those sorts of queries? And if there's someone out there at home who maybe wants to do, explore a bit of that in their own garden before they get to Holland with you, are there common things you see going wrong is what I'm really angling at.
Yeah, I think probably the biggest thing is people are so overawed, and especially out in the tulip fields, they go, how on earth do I choose what to photograph? And that's the biggest thing. And what I generally do is say, you've got to let your eye settle where your eye settles, and don't panic about trying to capture it all, because you're much better to try and focus on something that just caught your eye, whether it be a change of colour, something unusual, whether it be the dewdrops on the flowers. Don't be scared to focus on what you want to focus on and not worry about capturing the whole of Kokenhof or the whole of the tulip field. And then it's very much, I love to encourage people to play with the depth of field, especially if they've got a tripod. Here we'll set it up and I'll say, okay, start at f2.8, we'll focus on that tulip and focus on one of these tulip petals that you want, probably in this case maybe the one at the front or the middle, and then for an example, work through all the depth of field so that they've got the chance to see what it makes a difference as far as how many tulips in the background are in focus or how many of the petals in the foreground are focused. Lens wise, over the two, I run now on a 24-200 lens. I run just on one lens when I'm doing most of my creative photography. So anything between 24-200 is fantastic, because if you've got the longer lenses, you just back off a bit and you get the lovely depth of field drop off when you're using the sort of slightly longer zoom. Again, these ones, it's a lot about choosing the backgrounds. And this is just a gift with the yellows and the pinks, but finding the right flowers as well. It's very easy to just focus on a flower, and then you find that it's got like little imperfections. So it's all about finding the flowers that please you and the shapes that please you, and then framing them and sort of bringing them to life within the setting. Or do you just want to take a photo of the flower and nothing to do with the setting? So it's generally, it's as much technical as it is about letting people recognize what they actually want to photograph and trying to encourage them to follow what they want to photograph, not necessarily just it's a flower, it has to be macro. It doesn't. None of these are actually taken on a macro lens. They're all taken on just my 24-200 zoom lens. It's just where you stand and depth of field and that kind of thing. So
is that with the the 6 and the, yeah,
Mark II. Yeah.
nice, yeah.
Yeah.
So it's, I mean, you can do everything with that setup. One camera, one lens.
Yeah.
You could be in the mountains, you could be in the
Yeah.
flowers, you could be on the beach, you can do whatever. But I think it's really interesting. It's true that it's finding the shape, the pattern that appeals. If you're on a beach and you are, you were trying to make a larger landscape, you might look for a really interesting rock formation or where the tides. It's the same thing. We're just you're looking at those shapes, aren't you, and how the colours interact and everything else.
Yeah.
But this is beautiful. It's really, really beautiful, and I think it's flow, isn't it? That's what we're trying to find, energy, through the frame.
Yeah.
But
I'm sorry, I'm constantly amazed by the Dutch and their choice of colour palette as well. Colours that go together at Kokenhof, you would never dream of wearing.
I was going to say, imagine this in your living room, on the wall with your wallpaper. It'd be pretty lively, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
But we did mention we were going to talk a little bit about intentional camera movement, or ICM as it's known, and also multiple exposure. I know you do bits of both, and that creative side of it's really, I think, felt like that's been a big thing for you, especially in the last few years, to kind of really develop and explore your own photography. So you would obviously be happy, more than happy, I would suggest, to help people with this. And I suppose, like you mentioned, because this is beautiful, it's like a painting really, it's a case of just reinterpreting, isn't it, what's in front of us in different ways.
Yeah. Actually, tulips are not the easiest thing to ICM, but groups of tulips like this lend itself beautifully to become sort of a Monet painting, that kind of thing. And when you're gifted with light like this on these ones, I tend to look, I really enjoy these sort of, palettes of colour, and then playing with the movements of the camera and getting rid of anything else that's going on. Literally this is just about colour and energy. And making it a little bit softer, because at the end of the day, flowers are soft. We look at them and then we think how gentle they are, not how harsh and how hard and how sharp they are. We enjoy them for the sort of the softness and the beauty that they have, and that's what I like to try and bring through with the ICM. But yes, I'm more than happy to help anybody, even if they've never tried it before, to give it a go out wherever, whether it be on the windmills, whether it be landscape, architecture, flowers, absolutely anything. If it's something you've always wanted to give a go, I don't expect you to do it all the time, even if you try it once. But yeah, and multiple exposures as well. So I'm more than happy to teach that to anybody that wants to learn.
Well, I think the more, the different, more ways of reinterpreting things we have in our locker, when we end up in different environments, in different light, in different scenes, in different moods ourselves, in different conditions, it's like a chef having access to a huge pantry of different quality goods, ingredients, isn't it? To then think, okay, well, how do I feel about this today? Well, I think that's really insightful what you said about the flowers. We feel them as soft. They're a subtle thing. They're a nice thing, aren't they? They're a gentle thing often. And so that would make sense photographically, in the same way if we were looking at a storm, we'd want that dynamism, that edge of danger, whatever it might be, through the scene. So I think that's a really interesting kind of way to frame it, so to speak.
Yeah.
We did mention, though, that obviously there are different ways to skin a cat, and we've talked about that. I really love this. I really wanted to make sure we had this in the conversation tonight, because it's quite different, isn't it? I suspect a lot of people will go and there'll be lots of, not similar images per se, but the palette, would always be similar. Whereas this, you've kind of completely flipped it around. So what was the inspiration here?
Yeah, this is what happens when you visited the same place for 11 years. You go, I don't need any more tulip images, but I want to take photos of tulips. So last year, I decided that last year was going to be my black and white year. And I didn't by any means take all black and white photos, but I did try every time I went out to make some black and white photos. And I was just discussing this with somebody the other day, and they said, what colour were these flowers? And I said, actually, they were white. Because I found it easier to envisage black and white with white flowers, even though I was trying to. But I just noticed the light on these, how they were like iridescent, and how the light was just capturing all the tiny tops of the leaves. And then, then it was just finding the sort of composition to play with. The first year I ever ran this tour, I had somebody come with an infrared camera, and I looked at him and I went, okay. But honestly, the images he made were absolutely beautiful, but he saw it in a completely different way to anybody else, and he just put his own stamp on it. So last year, I made a whole load of black and white images of tulips, and it's more about the form, the light, the shapes, the contrast. It's not about colour. because I think quite often the colour overtakes everything in tulips, to be honest. It's all about the colour.
It's
So it's
completely
nice.
different, isn't it? Yeah, completely different vibe. And I would love to see this printed. Have you managed to print this at all? This would be a great print. Oh, come on, Charlotte. I'll get onto Charlie. He'll sort you out a print. Don't
I need to
worry.
go on one of Adrian's courses and learn how to print my photos.
Yeah, no, but I think it'd be so different, and I think if you had 2 or 3, that'd be really great. I think the other good thing, just before we move off into the next topic here, is the great thing, isn't it, about the mirrorless cameras these days, is obviously you can see that in black and white through the viewfinder on the day, with the Nikons and with all of them, to lesser degrees or more, which makes a big difference, right? Because you can actually understand this is a black and white image. I'm going to compose for it in black and white. I'm going to expose for it in black and white. I'm going to think about it in black and white.
Yeah, absolutely. And generally, what I do is I'm working in RAW, and then I have it set up. And I'd sometimes, if I'm working in Square, but I also still have I have what I'm playing with the JPEG, but I have the raw image back as well. So if I want to go black and play with it and think, oh, okay, that black and white was a bit basic, then I've got the ability to pull it around back in the raw image when I come back to it. But yeah, it's much easier to envisage it if you're looking at it through the camera to start with, I find, without question.
Yeah, I think it would be really interesting for people to see as well how the different colours render in black and white. Well, of a pink flower, an orange flower, a green flower, etc., etc. But we're going to just move gears slightly. See what I did there?
There probably aren't any gears on this, actually, Sam.
Come on, Charlotte.
There probably are not gears on this bike.
Well, there's one gear. Go. You're killing me. You're killing me. No, because you get to some of the smaller villages as well, don't you? And then so we're going to just chat a little bit about them for a few minutes, and then we're going to get into the tulip fields as well. So just can you give us a feel location-wise, where we might be from Amsterdam? Are we kind of, how far out are we, etc., etc.?
Yeah, we're about 45 minutes northeast of Amsterdam. So Amsterdam sits actually on I don't know how you call it, like almost a horseshoe. It sits at the bottom of the horseshoe of, anybody Dutch watching, please excuse my ignorance. I think it's the IJsselmeer, but I think it is a controlled area of water where they've built sort of land bridges across.
Right.
And we go just up a little bit out of Amsterdam, and you actually very quickly leave Amsterdam, built up area as you go north. And there's a little village. Anybody that's looked at Baby Bells will know Edam cheese.
Oh,
and
yes.
we go to Edam. Amazingly, it's not that touristy. It's linked to another town, and the other town is horrifically touristy. And Edam doesn't seem to have been majorly affected by tourism. I think because it's so small and they can't get coaches in there. And there's not actually an awful lot of amenities once you get there. It's a beautiful little village. And we do a little walk round again, coffee stop, lunch stop if we're still there at lunchtime. And there's just little figures of 8 that we loop round, completely whatever speed the group wants to go. I point out things I've noticed. Some people point out other things. Some people, this doesn't rock some people's boats. It's like, yeah, it's a bike and it's windows. I love the symmetry. I love the fact that there's a black bike, black windows, these kind of things. And then it's just the framing of it and the composition and figuring out how to get it all square and upright and that kind of thing. So.
Yeah, well, that's really interesting about Edam, because I'm a big Edam fan. I like a bit of Edam.
That's not Edam. It's completely different. Dutch okay. Edam is not like.
Oh, is it not?
English Edam, no.
You're killing me here. You're
killing me. Come, Sam.
Okay, I may well make it out there. You never know. So are we still in this? Because this is another really beautiful scene. We've got this sort of painterly feel here a little bit as well, haven't we? So is this still in that general locale?
This is, in that general area. This is closer nearer to where the windmills are. And this is a classic, oh my God, look at that sky, stop the bus. We need to make these photos. Please, Charlie, pull across and try and find somewhere. And, the light on this is my favourite photography light ever, when you've got this black sky and, especially the trees in the foreground there. It's just lit up. And this is just where you're driving between to get to places. And sometimes places that we stop are not on the itinerary. And that's the wonderful thing about being in small groups. If people wants to shout and we've got a bit of time, I stop. It's not a problem, because some of the best photos can actually be the unpredictable ones at times. And they're the ones that nobody else on any other tour will have either, because, you've chosen as that group to stop. But this is very much rural Holland.
Classic big roofs,
Yeah,
water through the
big roofs,
foreground,
big
big
skies,
skies.
and then everything divided by straight lines of trees and canals.
Yeah.
So yeah,
I suppose that is the benefit with a fairly flat landscape, which I know could erroneously, in my opinion, be levelled as a criticism in general terms. But I mean, think about Norfolk. There's and the plains of the states, the United States, and the amazing photographs that have been made over there over the decades from years gone by. Those flatter landscapes do give a different vibe, don't they? And that huge sky can be really, really fun to play with photographically.
yeah. I mean, the Dutch masters didn't put skies in their pictures for fakely. It's honestly what you see in their paintings is what was there. And this is quite unusual because actually you've got lots of trees and you feel quite closed. If you go
Mm,
up just on the other side of those trees there, you're up on the top of the dike and you can see as far as the eye stretches. And actually, sometimes it's really, we sometimes talk about rules of thirds and things like that. When you're up there, it's one of those really good times to actually really break every rule and have the tiniest slither of land at the bottom and fill the sky, if the sky's a good one, obviously, and
mm.
fill your picture with sky because it's all about, same as Norfolk, it's about massive skies and land stretching out as far as the eye can see in the front of them. And then it's just a case of deciding what's important in the image and
Yeah,
what do you want to give value to. But yeah,
yeah.
I love skies. I mean, like, take the dog for a walk and I'm just like literally photographing a slither of land at the bottom and skies as high as they can see. So yeah.
Yeah, well, I think for a lot of people, if they're not used to seeing those big skies as well,
Mm.
that's really nice. Thank you everyone for watching and hanging around with us tonight. It's always cool to see so many of the regular names on here and obviously some newbies as well. We're going to just do about 15-20 more minutes. We've got some more images from the villages, and we're going to get into tulip fields very soon. Going to pick Charlotte's brain as a sort of secret agent of tulip goodness. And then just before we finish in 15-20 minutes time, I'm going to tell you about our upcoming live stream. We've got a very special live stream coming in a couple of weeks, pre-Christmas one. I'm going to tell you all about that as well. But we talked a bit about the architecture in the cities. I've seen a lot of these, I suppose, very high roofs. I don't know, triangular. I mean, all roofs are triangular to some degree, but you know what I'm saying. These tall, they look, they're quite characterful, I suppose, is what I'm fumbling for.
Yeah, I'm absolutely amazed because they do these really, really, really sort of sharp roofs, and you have
Mm.
the tiniest little room in them. And actually, some of them are really intriguing because you think there's a room in them, and then you go around the back, and actually, it's just fake. There's just a board there. There is no space.
Ah,
This is in Edam, and it's just, yeah, I just love the variation in architecture and how tiny some of the houses are. Literally one room wide, two rooms wide. They're tiny. You just wouldn't get anything like that in England unless it's like something left over from way bygone
yeah,
years,
300 years ago.
what these are. But it's and also the villages are lovely because you get different variations. Some of them are cottages for the workers, and then you go down the high street and they got like mansions from the tradesmen, and it's
Mm.
all depending on who lived in which areas. You get completely different architecture to photograph.
Yeah, we've seen some very typical Dutch things on this evening's chat, and we alluded at the beginning, didn't we, that the amazing thing about it geographically is that it's all in a fairly close area, so it's kind of like having a main shot of Holland to the arm. It's a bit like sort of seeing Pisa, Rome, Venice, and Sicily all sort of rammed into one short week, but without all the travelling. Because another very Dutch thing is, of course, the windmills, or we all think that at least. And again, forgive my ignorance because I have not been to this area. But are they dotted around everywhere, or is there a kind of fairly concentrated area of windmills in this particular zone, or how does it work?
This area here is an area called, I'll try and say it, Schermerhorn. And this actually isn't those windmills. It's a little bit further over. These are my secret windmills, these ones. These aren't the
Oh.
ones that are actually on the main tourist drag. They are completely separate. And I think these ones are lovelier because if you get the clouds, the sky, if you're willing to, I stand as close as I'm happy for anybody to get to the river, to the water. And so as long as you don't go past here, you'll be fine. And then the reflections, and it also depends on which ways these windmills are turning, because sometimes if they're turned away from us, because the top part turns completely.
Rotates.
So sometimes you'll turn up and they will be facing in the opposite direction, which does not make good photography. And I spend a lot of time trying to explain to people what makes a good windmill photography, what makes a good windmill photo actually. And it's not just like, oh, it's a windmill, to it. But yeah, there are a couple of places that we go for the windmills, and then they are sort of dotted around in the place. I think we've got a photo in a minute, which is the same area as this, but different windmills. They sit up on the tops of the dikes, and then we're down in the fields below if there's any tulips, fingers crossed, in that area.
So these are these inhabited generally, or are they okay? All right.
Yeah, most of these have been they're looked after by an organisation, a national organisation, and they help the people that live in them. But these are all lived in, these ones here. So yeah,
I can imagine. Yes, especially in the squares by rivers, windmill shaped lines. You know, there could be some really cool stuff to play with.
Yeah.
And also, you sometimes find men up windmill arms. I don't know what an arm of a windmill is called technically, but
sails. Well, the sails,
of course.
Yes.
Cool.
Yeah. So
these ones, great.
Yeah, they're doing some work on the laths that are underneath. I think there's two missing things, a bit missing there where there's a gap down there. And I just, you know, sometimes it's just a gift to take something different and to see people doing work on, you know, one of these old-fashioned buildings, and just to capture what's going on. Two little ants going up this little ladder.
I mean, it's quite perilous, isn't it? I'm not great with heights, believe it or not. I'm quite happy walking up like 3,000 meters, but I'm not pretty good at looking down when I'm up there. But this just scares the bejesus out of me, because this chap on the left doesn't seem to have any sort of, I'm sure he does have some safety thing, but I'm not seeing it. So
no, the way they were scampering up and down didn't look as though they had anything attached to them at all. And the gaps between them, you know, you're talking probably 2 foot between those laths, you know, they're not close together. So it's, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Well, again, it's a bit like our chap on the bike earlier, isn't it? You know, you just always got to be awake to things that might be happening in front of you, I suppose, and be reactive.
Yeah.
We are going to finish though with the last sort of 10 minutes of our chat. As I say, I've got a little bit of news at the end, so stick around with us for that. But obviously, we mentioned a few times about the tulips. We've mentioned why you do it at this time of year, and the big thing is the tulips. And obviously, with anything that can have some slight variation in timing, I can only imagine the fear that strikes you in the few weeks before, because I can absolutely understand that fear as the leader. But that said, it does seem to be fairly regular of sorts. Now, just kind of for us to understand, I suppose, are there, you know, vast swathes of these fields that are easily accessible? And where do you like to take people? Not necessarily the exact locations, because I know some of these you quite like the fact that it's not known by everybody, but you know, what's the general plan and how much time is there on the trip to get into this stuff?
Yeah, I always head up to the northwest of Holland for tulips. The general direction that most tourists go down to Kokenhof, and they do the tulips around. Unfortunately, because people are going in the fields so much, you cannot access the fields anymore down there, because they've got great rolls of barbed wire to stop the tourists getting in there, because they haven't, you know, followed what's required. So we head up to northwest, just north of Alkmaar, in fact, and it's actually quite patchy. There's an area that I go to which is just guaranteed. I've been going there for 10 years, and I always find so many fields of tulips. I'm never short of a tulip field at all. And the wonderful thing up there, very different to Kokenhof, is that it's open. There are no greenhouses in the pictures. You do get these wind turbines, which, you know, positive or negative, however you want to look at it. I think they add something to the landscape, because they are actually quite an important part of the landscape up in the north of Holland. And so, yeah, it's blocks, and these fields are massive. I mean, I couldn't even tell you how many hectares they are. But they're, as far as what there are, is the area is divided up into blocks, and then there's a road, there's a canal, there's more blocks. So basically what we do, we have a whole day dedicated to what I call tulip treasure hunting. And basically we base ourselves the night before in an area so that we can get sunrise. This was sunrise in the area. This is my place where we head, because it's only 10 minutes from the hotel, so it's really easy to get to. And then depending on if people want to shoot behind or in front, you can shoot in both directions as well. And it is a 4:30 early start, because it's quite an early sunrise at that time of the year. But yeah, sometimes you get these blocks of colour just of one tulip, and then other times you've got fields with multiple different colours of tulips in. It just depends on how they've been planted, because each of these blocks of land belongs to different tulip growers. And so it's up to them what they want to do with these blocks of land. And they actually are rotated between growers every year, and the land is rotated every year. So if I take these photos one year, I will know there will not be tulips there for another 6 years, because they rotate on a 6-year cycle. So, you know, they might move them across slightly. They might even put something like daffodils or hyacinths instead, but there won't be tulips there for the next few years. And then it's all about, you were talking about lenses earlier with tulips. It's all about picking the right lens so you can bring the tulips as close to the windmills. That's where going back a bit further and using a zoom lens and trying to lose these bare patches of land and things come in. And these tulips are just round, these windmills are just around the corner from the set of 3. And I say to people, it's a bonus if we get this. I cannot guarantee that you will not have to Photoshop your tulips and your windmills together. But so far, every year, I've got lucky. We have managed to find them. Sometimes they're a bit further away than other times. But, you know, if you're willing to play and sort of look at different angles and figure out how to bring it all together, then generally it's possible to get something.
Yeah, I suppose with the longer lenses, you know, the height at which you're standing at, etc., you can do all sorts of things to bring stuff together, can't you, with that viewpoint? But I mean, this particular image, that sort of streak of hot yellow, I'm calling it hot yellow, it's just so arresting, isn't it? There's something about such bold colours that still absolutely grabs us, isn't there, visually? You know, it's so appealing to play with photographically as well.
Yeah. And as I said before, it just doesn't work if you put it on a dress. But with flowers, it looks wonderful, and for photography, it's just wonderful. And you did ask how close do we get? Basically, with where we drive is super, because the road's quite wide, the verges are really wide, so we can pull off anywhere all the while. And because we're always careful, we never go actually into the flowers. We go right up to the edge of them, but we never actually go into them unless they've been cut already. And because people respect, and because it's not such a tourist area, farmers are more than happy to chat to you when you're stood in the fields photographing. You know, it's much more relaxed, and as long as people like myself and other tour guides abide with what the farmers request, then, you know, it will stay like that up there. And this is actually from a couple of years ago now, but I just love these. This is another one, you know, do you go with a wide lens? Do you go narrow? How much of the picture do you get in? Sometimes I take this kind of picture without any sky, and it's just diagonal lines, and there's no concept of actually being a landscape. If you look really carefully, there is a tiny little windmill right at the back of that, which is where all the lines are going to. And then it's deciding, do you put the gap in the middle, or do you stand in the middle of, it's and which of these colours do you want in your picture, you know?
But it goes back to what you were saying, doesn't it? That it's actually a lot harder than it seems, these sorts of situations, because it's a bit like, you know, if you're at the Grand Canyon, or I mean, that's the classic example everyone uses, but when we're stood there looking at it through our eyes and our senses, our smell and all the rest of it, we see it and we go, wow, that's amazing. Now, obviously, we all know, as everyone watching this is a photographer of you know, many years, often a lot of you, it's how we translate what we're seeing there into our camera and into our sensor, and it is very difficult to just get everything in. So you're really good at finding the shape, the lines, the structure of what needs to happen, because here, like you said, there, even just with this, there's a myriad of ways you could go left, right, up, down, longer, shorter. You know, this is just in one scene of one place at one time on one day, isn't it?
Yeah.
But that's good, because it's kind of never ending, and which is why you're quite happy to keep going back as well.
Yeah. No year's the same, you know. No fields are the same, and you get different backdrops and you get different skies. Yeah, it's just never the same. So like I said, we can have a whole day just sort of tulip treasure hunting, and if somebody wants to play bingo with their colours, they can, you know, fill up the bingo card with different colours. Eventually, you know, after about a day, most people are like done with the, you know, there's so many tulips, only so many tulip photos you can take. And then we go to Copenhagen as well. So it's you know, it's, you have no shortage.
You've got plenty of opportunity. Yeah, exactly. And I think that's, if someone, that'd be a nice way to do it, is to find a colour, work on that colour, you know, yellows in various places, yellows in the city, yellows, what you could come back with a full yellow portfolio.
Maybe I'll do that next year, Sam. That's my next thing. I'll pick a colour and that will be it.
You are welcome. No. So
Yes.
let's finish on this, and then, like I say, I've got a little announcement about our next stream. But I really love this. So I wanted to have this as our last image, because we talked about obviously they're using the yellow, but your matching of the colours, you know, how other colours can support, how other colours take away, you know, where things are in the frame, focus. I kind of wanted this last because it's kind of got a bit of everything we've talked about so far in terms of where we position things, why. Now, are you at some horrific angle here, or are you just fairly low down on a tripod? I can sort of envisage you sort of face down in a field somewhere or something.
Yeah, almost face down. I don't think,
Okay.
given these are hyacinths, okay, so they are only this tall.
Nice.
I'm quite low down. I'm probably on my tummy, to be honest, but not so far on my tummy because I have actually got the hyacinth field running behind. If I was too low down, I'd get the sky, and that's not what I wanted. I wanted to carry that purple through the whole image, even though it changes color, because as you go out, obviously the light changes. Yeah, I always say to people, bring a pair of spare trousers, and I will provide plastic bags so you can get down and not too dirty. The number of photos, I love taking pictures of the group when they're all lying on their backs, photographing one of these tulips and stuff like that. It's sand, so even if it's really wet, it's never that wet, and it's never muddy or such, so it's not that big a deal. But I love spotting things that shouldn't be where they are, and this shouldn't be in there. This was like the previous year. And it's popped up, and it's just so beautiful, and the color is just lovely. And you know, choosing to go with a really shallow depth of field and make it just about that, but then all the color around it just helps to balance and helps to support that tulip rather than taking away from it. And I think it's just like, yeah, it's just a tulip being a tulip in its own way, and it probably has no idea it shouldn't be there, and it's different, but
That's why it works. And
yeah,
also those three sort of shoots of green, you know, the other parts, just two to the left, one to the right, really kind of actually help. I don't know why, but I think they're really important in that whole thing working. So no, that's really cool. Just one thing before I finish on this, and then, like I say, we're just quickly going to cover what's coming up next. For everyone who's watching tonight, this tour, Charlotte runs in April, so 28th of April, 2nd of May. The next one is obviously 2024. It's fairly booked, but there are two, I believe, when I last checked earlier today, there are two places available. Now, you don't need me to tell you, because we've just spent the last hour talking about this. If you would like to go out there and you are interested in this variety of photography that you would encounter, there is nobody better to do it with than somebody who has been living there for a good number of years and has done this regularly with lots of different people. And as we've explained, things change every year, so it's really important that you go with someone who knows where they're taking you, why they're taking you, all the rest of it. And I know that a lot of people have really enjoyed doing these with Charlotte and Sue in the past and all the rest of it. So do check that out. You can find out more about the tour, lightenland.co.uk. Buy it for your significant other for Christmas. I don't know. Do something, gift it to somebody, whatever you may want to do. I just want to say a big thank you, though, Charlotte. Let me just pop this off just for a sec, because it's been really cool to have you back on the live stream, and I'm sure everyone watching appreciates the background that you've given us. So thank you very much.
No, thank you very much for having me and let me share my lovely pictures. I could bore you with many, many more.
It's a pleasure. Yeah. No. Well, we may well be back for more stuff in the future. And actually, there's a couple of things coming up here. So Barbara, wonderful photographic opportunities. Thank you, Charlotte. So thank you, Barbara, for watching. Talking of things in the future, what a segue. We are doing, and I say we, I'll explain who that is. Slight changing gears. Sorry, Charlotte. Here we've gone completely to different parts of the world. This is not Holland, everyone. Myself, Astrid, Ed, and Tom are all joining in for a 4-way winter-themed live stream special in a couple of weeks' time. Why is it special? Because there's 4 of us, and also because we're going to be talking all things winter. So snow, ice. We're going to share, me and the other 3, we're going to share 3 or 4 images each, and we're going to talk to you about where they were shot, things we thought about, things to consider if you're shooting in winter generally, locations, gear, composition, everything you want to know about winter images to hopefully inspire you all to go out there and shoot some more of your own winter images. And you'll get to see stuff from all over the world. from myself, from Ed, from Tom, and from Astrid. And it's not just all going to be snow. I've challenged them to come up with some different winter-based themes so that we can talk about a variety of different things about shooting in winter, the quality of light, the locations we might get to in that time, the mood, and all this kind of cool stuff. So that's in a couple of weeks' time. That is Tuesday, 19th of December. So a couple of weeks, 8 p.m. here on the YouTube or the Facebook stream in our usual place. Let me just knock that off for a second because I just want to pick up on a couple of nice comments before I let everybody go. Colin, thank you for being with us, and thank you for watching. Brenda, beautiful inspiring images, thank you. Charlotte and Joaquin, beautiful photos, brought back great memories from a wonderful tour in that area with Charlotte in April 2022. There we go. Well, it's all changed next year, so get back there. Joaquin, you've got to do it again. No. All right, good. I think I'll let us go because we're bang on time. But Charlotte, once again, really, really appreciate you coming on. Thanks very much. Hopefully I'll catch up with you at some point soon. And for everyone else that's watched, we really appreciate it as ever. Join me in a couple of weeks' time for the winter live stream. But for now, cheerio for now. Goodbye.
Bye.